So, you want to hear a story, huh?
Borderlands 4 upon reveal was greeted by a lot of skepticism, and it's not hard to see why. Borderlands 3 had initially been a letdown to many fans. It proved, however, to be much better than I originally thought when I revisited it for the retrospective, which you can find linked up above if you haven't seen it yet. I won't lie though, when I saw the initial trailer for Borderlands 4, I was excited, and upon revisiting the mainline games, that excitement only grew. Now that I've spent dozens and dozens of hours on Kairos, I think it's time to answer the question, is Borderlands 4 actually worth playing? On startup, we're greeted as always by our trusty narrator Marcus, and he begins to tell us there's more stories to tell, and this one could set the 6 galaxies ablaze, and it all starts on Kairos. He tells us it's been locked away for 1,000 years, and it's actually a prison ruled by the Timekeeper. Now, the reason it's been kept from the rest of the universe is because at the center of it lies a vault, home to the Timekeeper's power. As always, where there's a vault, vault hunters are sure to follow. But the catalyst to our story is actually a moon, breaking the veil surrounding the planet 6 years ago. Now, we know this to be Elpis through all the marketing and all the trailers. After the opening cutscene, we're shown what's a gruesome cinematic of a woman having a contraption ripped out of her spine by a group of psychos. Quickly, mayhem ensues as a ship crashes into them, and once the ship opens, we're introduced to our 4 starting Vault Hunters this time around. We have Rafa the Exo Soldier, Harlow the Gravatar, Amon the Forge Knight, and finally Vex the Siren. After our crew dispatches the Psychos, they're set upon by the Order, the Timekeeper's military. We then see the 4 hunters detained and carted away to jail. The character screen this time around is much more in line with Borderlands 3 and 1 than it is with 2. We see all 4 playable characters, and we can move the cursor freely around them and get a little backstory on each of them as well. And we also get to see what elemental affinities they have. That's right, for the first time since Borderlands 1, each playable character has elements that synergize with their action skill. For example, I chose Rafa for this playthrough, and his skills work really well with shock or corrosive damage. Vex right now is the only character whose affinities are kinetic and all elemental types. We haven't seen this in the past couple of games, and while it doesn't shoehorn you into a specific weapon type like the first game, it does let you lean into which elements you tend to prefer to play with. Once you select your character, you're seamlessly brought into a cutscene where you're escorted to a torture chamber to be fitted with a bolt. A bolt is what the Timekeeper uses to subdue and control the people here on Kairos. It's also what the psychos were ripping out of that farmer during the intro cinematic. After a brief back and forth with the Timekeeper himself, we are sprung from our restraints by RJ, a member of the Crimson Resistance. RJ has been sent here to break out the prisoners and to get them to safety so that we can all join the Resistance. He also explains that the bolt in our neck allows the Timekeeper to talk to us, talk through us, and to use us as puppets. The reason why RJ can't be affected the same way is because he has an Echo 4 unit which jams the signal. What follows next is a small tutorial segment covering the bare-bone basics of the game: movement, combat, looting, and all of it culminating in a boss fight against the Warden. What's interesting about this fight and a few others in the early hours of the game is that these fights are actually an introduction to different enemy types you'll face in the wild. Another thing I should mention is on later playthroughs, say you want to play through a second time with a different Vault Hunter, you have the option to skip the prologue and jump right into the main game. After dispatching the Warden, we enter a cutscene which reminds me of Destiny cutscenes, specifically in how they're shot and framed. It could be the way they're mocapped, but it was just something I noticed. In fact, there will be other similarities, but we'll get to that later. RJ is getting a ship ready to take both of us out of the prison, but unfortunately, the Timekeeper isn't fond of that plan. He takes over our bolt and begins to use us to beat and strangle RJ, and in a last-ditch effort, RJ transfers ownership from Echo 4 to us, thus jamming the signal to our bolt, allowing us to regain composure. Unfortunately, the Timekeeper takes this as an opportunity to control RJ now, mocking us before running a knife through our new pal, killing him. Before we have a chance to react, the ship which RJ was trying to get ready for us explodes, sending us into the waters below. We awake on a beach to a funny little robot throwing garbage at us. That's right, it's the return of Claptrap. He gives us the tour of his setup as we inform him of the passing of RJ, but he doesn't really seem too concerned as he now wants to bring us into the Resistance. To do so, we need to take out some Rippers, reclaim a hover pack, and secure a security tower. This prologue is all relatively close together, and it does a good job of getting us used to one of the main enemy factions, as well as introducing us to some of the new movement mechanics. The Rippers are led by a woman named Callus, and their MO is to go around and forcibly tear the bolts out of people's necks, breaking the Timekeeper's hold on them. However, by doing this, it causes the individual to develop extreme psychosis. What this does as a writing tool is it allows Gearbox to have its familiar psycho enemy type, but it gives them something to stand out from those on Pandora. If you remember, the psychos on Elpis and Pandora were old doll miners and prisoners that were left behind when the Corp pulled out, turning them into the raving mad bandits that we know today. As we make our way through the Ripper camp, we learn how to grapple, wall run, and eventually, after defeating Splash Zone, use the hover pack. All three of these mechanics speed up movement and exploration, and I personally loved running around Kairos using the tether to slingshot myself into the air. Once airborne, I'd activate the returning butt slam to get back into the action quickly, or use the hover pack to carry my momentum across gaps. The wall running is nice, but you can only do it at specific areas, so it's not as useful as I would have hoped. But in the same regard, this also prevents it from being utterly broke. There's also a new double jump that you can activate on all the characters. Remember earlier when I said that the in-game cutscenes felt very reminiscent of Destiny? Well, so does the double jump and the new Digi-Runners, which I'll get into later. While it's not 100% confirmed, upon my research, I found that there's been some speculation that after the massive Bungie layoff, a handful of people who were there and who were let go made their way over to Gearbox. If I'm going to be 100% honest, I can believe it. There's something in the DNA of this game that, while it still feels like Borderlands, it has traces of early Destiny woven through it. I have a few more examples to back that up, but before I do, let's finish helping Claptrap. After we take care of Splash Zone and get the hover pack, we head up the abandoned tower and use our new Echo 4 to activate its systems, giving us our first base of operations. Claptrap then asks us to head out and get in touch with the Outbounders and try to recruit them into the Crimson Resistance. It's here where we finally get to go out and experience Kairos on our own. Thankfully, there's plenty to do. Borderlands, unlike previous installments, opts for a full-blown open world as opposed to the open zones like its predecessors. What this does is not only give the player a bit of agency to go out and explore, it lets us go about things at our own pace. Where other games had you moving from one zone to the next, doing maybe the random handful of side missions here or there, Borderlands 4 lets you go out and explore, and there's plenty to go out and do. However, upon finishing the game, the main story does drive you in a very linear path if you continue down it one after another. In terms of all these side activities to do, we're going to start with contracts, as you have access to them right after activating the tower. Contracts are repeatable side missions that send you out into the world to defeat a certain number of enemies, collect items, or grab an item and carry it back to the deposit box at your safe house. When I first started my playthrough, I didn't know these were repeatable, so I just kept doing them. They aren't terrible like the Radiant quests of Fallout 4, and they give you a good amount of rewards for them. However, when it comes to bringing the specific item back to the safe house, you have to manually carry it back. That means no fast travel and no digi-running. Speaking of, let's talk about traveling around the planet. This isn't the only safe house you'll come across. In fact, there are dozens spread across Kairos, and you'll need to activate them to be able to access the fast travel network. Thankfully, unlocking them is as easy as finding a datapad and activating the command console. You'll be going around on foot for a good portion of the early game, but once you do a few main missions, you'll have access to the Digi-Runner. This is the Borderlands 4 version of a Sparrow from Destiny 2. See, I told you the comparisons weren't done yet. Digi-runners come in various shapes and styles, which you'll get for completing challenges, missions. However, unlike Borderlands 3, you can't customize individual parts, just the thruster drive, which are made by the weapon manufacturers, and the paint job. Both of these are varied, and they drop via challenges and quest rewards. So we know how we're going to get around, but where do we actually get to go? Kairos is broken up into 4 major sections. We have the Fade Fields, Terminus Range, Carcadia Burn, and Dominion. Once you progress far enough in the main story, you'll be given access to leave the Fade Fields and head out into either Terminus Range or Carcadia Burn. Dominion is locked off until the end of the game. Now, I personally went to Terminus Range first, which is this snowy mountain. Carcadia is this desolate desert littered with torn down buildings and blown out structures. While you can go to either place first and there doesn't seem to be any difference, I personally feel that going to Terminus Range first makes the most sense from a story standpoint because of your interactions with Amara. We'll loop back here in a second, but I do want to talk about the open world as a whole. While all the areas look great, I think only having 3 major zones actually does a disservice to the game. Yes, it all ends up working narratively, but it leaves the level variation very low. Where in previous games we got multiple types of biomes, here we only get 3. It's not a major problem, but if you're like me and want to do all the activities the game has to offer, you could be seeing a lot of the same environments and they could become a bit boring. And personally, Carcadia Burn is my least favorite zone to explore because it's so jagged with all of its different cliffs and valleys that it becomes a pain to navigate through. And I've talked to a couple different people who share the same sentiment. Now, about our Siren friend. It's not a spoiler to say Amara and Zane show up in the game. They were featured in all of the pre-launch press, and this continues the Borderlands tradition of having old Vault Hunters be NPCs. Amara is found during the Terminus Range main quest with Hermes, a now much bigger furry companion from Borderlands 3. And Zane's off in Carcadia with everyone's favorite barkeep Moxie. I mentioned this on a TikTok while I was playing through the game, but I actually enjoyed seeing them show back up, especially Zane, mostly because I played as him in my recent Borderlands 3 playthrough. It also works really well because it shows Gearbox's ability to play with tone and range in their writing. Zane is played as a comedic relief character this time, and Amara is more of the straight man type of character. They banter and bounce off of each other in later levels, which helps make them feel like true companions, like they actually went on the adventures that they did in the last game. You can tell they've seen some stuff and have been through the ringer. While we're on the subject, let's actually talk about the writing. One of my main gripes in Borderlands 3 was the writing. While it wasn't hot garbage like everyone says it is, it wasn't amazing. It was just okay. It tried too hard to be too wacky sometimes, especially when it came to its main villains, and even though Vault Hunters would remark on events around them, it didn't feel like NPCs would react to us. It felt like we were always absent during cutscenes, even though, canonically, we're standing 2 feet from the action. I'm happy to say, though, that when Gearbox said they were going back to a more grounded style, they weren't lying. Borderlands 4, in my opinion, is more in line with Borderlands 2 when it comes to its writing than it is with 3. On average, the writing's just better. When it wants to be serious, it comes across that way. When it wants to make a joke or remark, they land it. Hell, even Claptrap this time has some good moments. The fact that the other characters want nothing to do with him, and that there's an option to mute his lines, is gold because it falls in line with everything the other games have set up. But the real kicker is that now our Vault Hunter feels like a part of the story. Characters talk to us instead of talking at us, and sometimes they even refer to us by name rather than just by Vault Hunter or Killer. On top of that, we're in every major in-game cutscene, so we're always part of the action. It never feels disjointed or disconnected. Will every joke land? No, of course not. But it's the return to form that we were promised. The only thing I wish we got is more interactions with the Timekeeper. It feels like Gearbox were trying to tame things this time around, and they pulled back how many times he'd come over the Echo Net to chastise us. It's not as absent as Commandant Steele was, or overabundant as the Calypso twins were, but it doesn't feel as frequent as Jack. That could be because this time around each major zone is controlled by someone tied to the Timekeeper, so each zone, much like Borderlands 1, has their own final boss presiding over it. What would have been cooler is seeing the Timekeeper control more NPCs as the game progressed. That would really give this sense of him always watching. It also helps add a greater sense of oppression through the zones. The only zone that really felt like it was in a chokehold is Dominion, which is the final zone of the game, and if you're surgical about how you get through that zone, it's the shortest zone in the game. Thankfully, there's plenty to do outside of just the main story. Like every Borderlands game, you have your main quests and your side content. This time, however, besides side quests, there's tons of optional collectibles and activities to do. Borderlands 4 takes a page out of Borderlands 3's book in this regard. Besides contracts, there are returning vault symbols to find, mini Marcus bobbleheads to collect, echo logs, journals left behind by RJ, torn bolts, and so much more. Then you've got bigger activities like auger mines and bunkers. Both can't be accessed until you progress far enough into the main story, but when you do, you'll be able to go through a mini dungeon with a boss at the end of it. After opening the chests and collecting the loot, you can tether a rift to access Moxxi's Big Encore. You can access Big Encore as early as Splash Zone, and what it allows you to do is farm any major boss in the game for a few dollars, and in the post-game, you can spend Iridium to fight an even harder version. This is a great way to farm gear once you've acquired a good amount of money. The amount of money you'll get back for selling the weapons and gear that drop from the boss that you don't need will almost always cover the cost of starting Big Encore. You may have seen people farming the first boss, Splash Zone, and I still do. It's a more engaging way to farm quick gear instead of just popping golden keys. More on them later. There are the aforementioned safe houses and silos, which open up the fast travel system, but where safe houses give you access to the contract board, silos will reveal a location of a vault key fragment to go out and find. Where Borderlands 3 had the vaults tied to the main story, in Borderlands 4 they're completely optional. I located the one in the Fade Fields during my playthrough and was thoroughly surprised with what it offered. You pass through a series of combat arenas before facing off against a massive vault monster. What's great if you're a solo player is they fill the edge of the room with ads, which allows you to revive yourself if you go down. This prevented me from having to constantly wipe and start the whole fight over again, which would have made this feel so much more tedious, and it would have sucked the fun out of it. I will say, in terms of the vaults, if you're deep into the lore like I am, I'd wait until after you finish the main campaign, because while the lore in the Fade Fields vault has massive implications, I feel like it almost makes more sense to do it after the reveals that take place during the final boss fight. But I'd actually love to hear what you guys think. Do you think it makes more sense to do it after the main mission, or in tandem with progressing through the main mission? The best part about all of this is that everything you do on Kairos rewards you in some way. Whether that's opening chests and supply caches, going out and fishing, you always find a way to upgrade your Vault Hunter. All of the major activities and collectibles shower you with loot, experience points, upgrades, and cosmetics. I haven't even touched on world events, which is their version of public events from Destiny, but 9 times out of 10, it's just a boss you can kill. Just don't die or step out of the bubble or else the event will end. It's one thing that kind of sucks about it, if I'm being honest, because I'd much rather get up and try it again. It never felt like I was checking off a list because I was always getting 1% better, and I never felt like I had to do anything. I always felt like I wanted to do these things. At the end of the game, however, the scaling is off, and it can make your time in Dominion frustrating because enemies at that point will outscale your level, so you just need better gear rather than higher levels. Because no matter how many times you level up your Vault Hunter, the enemies will always be at least 3 to 4 levels higher. With all of these obstacles to overcome though, you're going to need some serious firepower, and thankfully, Borderlands 4 does not skimp out on loot. Like previous entries, you can equip 4 weapons, a piece of ordnance, a shield, a class item, a new type of mod, and a healing syringe. Let's start with the newcomers. Instead of using a weapon slot for a heavy weapon like a rocket launcher, these pieces of gear now share a slot with grenades and the new throwing knives. Each has their own stats and licensed parts, and they use charges instead of ammo, which makes them more viable during big encounters because once you spend them, they just passively recharge over time. Licensed parts are a new feature that lets guns license out space for pieces from other manufacturers. For instance, you can have an auto rifle from the Order manufacturer, but it shoots Torg branded sticky grenades. Or you could have a Tediore pistol with Vladoff mini rockets. Because of this, there are a couple corporations that are absent this time around. But instead, they license out parts to the other manufacturers. So the 7 purveyors this time are the newly added Daedalus, Order, and Ripper, and the returning ones are Jacobs, Maliwan, Tediore, Torg, and Vladoff. Atlas, COV, and Hyperion will all appear as licensed parts. Dahl, however, is just absolutely nowhere to be found. The new mod, which takes the place of artifacts, works specifically to provide bonuses for licensed gun parts. For instance, I have one equipped which lets any gun with a Tediore mag regain 50% of its ammo on reload. Another big change this time around is health. While enemies can still drop health pickups, we now have healing syringes which allow us to heal with the tap of a button, and it recharges after a short cooldown. There's a ton of other new features on top of that, like firmwares and specializations, but at the time of writing, I've only just unlocked them after beating the main story, so I can't speak on them too much. One thing I will say is that Gearbox definitely retuned drop rates. I wasn't swimming in legendaries or epics this time around, but I found a good amount of epics through my adventure to the point where by the time I rolled credits, I had mostly epic gear minus 1 or 2 rares to fill my slots out. One benefit of this game being brand new is golden keys are rare. The chest does return, and it's found in all 4 major safe houses. You earn keys by activating shift codes found on social media like you always have. When I beat the game, I had gathered a total of 6 keys, but I only spent 2 of them throughout my playthrough just to give me a quick boost when needed. And that's everything on weapons as far as I know, because I don't think there are any diamond keys this time around, and there's no rarity above epics like pearlescence. Storage deck upgrades return, and you can upgrade them this time by getting tokens from doing various activities across the map. This was another reason why I said everything you do in this game will help you upgrade your character. But guns aren't the only way to survive Kairos. Action skills return and have seen a slight upgrade. Each character has 3 major trees, like in Borderlands 3, you can pick from one of the 3 action skills. However, there's no dual wielding skills like you did in the previous game. Now once you pick a skill, it will have 1 major tree and 3 smaller branching trees. In the 4 trees, you can pick an augmentation, much like the previous title, and at the end of the 3 minor trees, there is a capstone passive ability which adds a powerful buff to your skills. During my playthrough, I went with Rafa and focused on the Arc Knives tree, and the build I went with prioritized corrosive damage and keeping my action skill up as long as possible while healing me during use. I've seen people say that his trees remind them of an evolution of the soldier class and even a little bit of Salvador, and I can see it honestly. I will say this is the first Borderlands game where I've wanted to immediately do a second playthrough upon beating the final boss. Usually, this is the part where I talk about what the final boss entails and show the end of the game. But with Borderlands 4 being only a month and a half old, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't played it yet. I will say that the game took some turns narratively that I did not expect, and if you've been a fan for as long as I have, there are some heavy story beats and implications that make me very hopeful for the future of the franchise. But you may be asking yourself, what's there to do after we confront the Timekeeper? Well, there's actually a good amount to tackle. You have any remaining side content to go out and collect, as well as the journey to Ultimate Vault Hunter. Now, in full transparency, I haven't played too much of the endgame, but post-credits you'll be pointed in the direction of becoming an ultimate Vault Hunter, and you'll replay some missions on a harder difficulty with different enemy modifications. That's something I didn't touch on earlier in the video, but there are really only 2 enemy factions you'll be facing against, besides the normal creatures that are part of the wildlife. You have the Order and the Rippers. Every enemy, however, has the chance to roll with a buff to make things more challenging, such as regenerating health, or they're invisible until you destroy an orb. Thankfully, Gearbox has given us a roadmap of all upcoming DLC, with the first bounty pack dropping in a month or so, and the first additional Vault Hunter being added early next year with the first major story DLC. This is the first time we're getting post-launch Vault Hunters since the pre-sequel. I was hesitant at first to buy the season pass, but after spending 30 plus hours on the game, I'm extremely hopeful for the direction we're headed in with Borderlands, and I think I might just have to go around and buy the DLC right away. Well, there you go. 4 games and 4 videos down. Borderlands as a franchise has had its ups and lows, and while I didn't cover all of the games, the 4 main titles definitely offer a good mix of all kinds of experiences. Depending on who you ask, it's had more lows than highs, but personally I would disagree with that notion. In an age where devs don't listen to their players and just shove things out the door, what we've gotten with Borderlands 4 is a game that's taken its past lessons and implemented the changes that they needed to. Now, is it a perfect game? No, absolutely not. There's some horrible optimization problems, the zones can get a bit samey, and the Order-made weapons are a bit too plentiful, and they don't feel the best to use. But that only takes this game down a point or two. The story, the characters, the world, hell, the world building Borderlands 4 does makes it a great game. This game made me wonder what happened in the 6 years since the end of Borderlands 3. What led Amara and the crew to find Kairos? Not only that, but where's everyone else that was in Sanctuary? This game raises new questions while bringing old plot threads that we once thought dead back to life. So in the grand scheme of things, Borderlands 4 was not only worth it, it's worth every minute. And now, we just have to wait and see what new threats on the horizon.